All right. Chapter 3, Section 5. Like I said, we're close to the end of Chapter 3. Trying to get it all knocked out real quick. That way we can test after Thanksgiving break. So, 3.5, completing the square. Let's talk about what that means. So, a few sections ago, we solved equations of the form u squared equals d by taking the square root of each side. You guys remember that? If I had something squared equaling a number, to get x by itself, I could take the square root of both sides. This method also works when one side of an equation is a perfect square trinomial and the other side is a constant. So a perfect square trinomial is a trinomial that factors in to two factors that are the same thing. So it would look like, it would factor into that, where my factors are the same. What's another way I could write x plus 3 times x plus 3?
X plus 3 squared.
Very good. Does everyone understand that property right there? So, that's what this is saying up here. This method also works when one side of an equation is a perfect square trinomial. So if I'm FOILed this out, this would become a perfect square trinomial. And if I had the other side as a constant, I could go ahead and take the square root of this and the other side, and that'll help me solve my equation. Is anyone writing this down, or can I move on? Whenever we're taking notes, I'm not always going to wait for everyone to finish writing the whole slide. And the reason why is because I do post my notes to Canvas. So if you miss something, you can always go watch the video again and get it from that video. And everything I just literally take right out of the book. So this stuff is in your textbook as well. Okay? So let's move on to this example. Solve x squared minus 16x plus 64 equals 100 using square roots. So we're going to begin this problem by factoring the polynomial that's on the left-hand side. So x squared minus 16x plus 64. Okay? Do I need to do slide and divide or factoring by grouping or anything like that? Is it a difference of squares? No, so this is just normal factoring. Create my two parentheses. What variable am I using? X, so fill in my variables. The plus sign in front of my C value tells me what? My signs are going to be the same. If they're going to be the same, this sign tells me what they're going to be, so what are they both going to be? Both going to be minus, minus. Now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 64, add to give me negative 16. What are some things that multiply to give me 64? Negative 8. Negative 8. What's negative 8 plus negative 8?
Negative 16.
Negative 16. Is that what I'm wanting? Yes, it is. So I get x minus 8. X minus 8. Oh, look. Perfect square trinomial. Because my two factors are the same exact thing, right? So how can I write x minus 8 times x minus 8? And x minus 8 squared equals 100. Everyone okay with that? Any questions on what we've done so far? We've just factored. My two factors are the same, so I can write it as x minus 8 squared. So, for using square roots, where do you think I'm going to go from here? How do you think I'm going to get rid of that squared with my x minus 8? Take the square root of both sides. So on the left-hand side, it'd be left with x minus 8. What's the square root of 100? What?
10.
Just 10?
Yes.
Yeah.
10.
Positive or negative?
There we go. Plus or minus 10.
Yeah.
Because positive 10 squared gives me 100, but also negative 10 squared also gives me 100, right?
Right.
So I've got to account for that positive and the negative value. Is x by itself yet?
No, you gotta add
What do I have to do with the 8 minus 8?
Plus it.
Add 8 to both sides. Can I erase my top row of work right here? Okay. And my second row?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. So I would get x equals 8 plus or minus 10. Now, I'm actually going to figure what these are. It's just going to be x equals 8 plus 10, x equals 8 minus 10. That's just what the plus or minus means. I've got to do 8 plus 10 and I've got to do 8 minus 10. So what's 8 plus 10?
18.
18. So 18 is one of my solutions. What's 8 minus 10?
-2.
Negative 2. So negative 2 is my other solution. Any questions there? We okay with that?
Wait,
If I get 8 plus or minus 10, I've got to do 8 plus 10, and I've got to do 8 minus 10.
So wait, so you got them in the parentheses, but you have to do more after that?
What do you mean?
So you got it to x minus 8, and then another one, x minus 8. Oh yeah, you went to square.
Like that, right?
Yeah.
That's what I had.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to get x by itself. I'm trying to solve the equation, right? Well, there's nothing more that I can do on that left-hand side. So now I need to get rid of that squared with my whole binomial. So I take the square root of both sides. So I got x minus 8 equals plus or minus 10. Now I can do some other things to get x by itself. Add 8 to both sides.
Yeah.
And that's the answer.
So 8 plus or minus 10. So my two answers are 18 and negative 2.
Okay.
Okay?
Can we just write that?
What do you mean?
Like, we write x equals 18 and negative 2, or do we have to write it all?
You could separate them with a comma. If you wanted to write x equals 18, negative 2. You could write it like that if you wanted to. Okay? Questions on example 1? We okay with that? All it's saying is if we have a perfect square trinomial, I can still use the square root method to solve my equations. Okay? Can I move on?
Yeah.
So in example 1, the expression x squared minus 16x plus 64 is a perfect square trinomial because my two factors were the same, right? So I could write it as x minus 8 squared. Sometimes you need to add a term to an expression x squared plus bx to make it a perfect square trinomial. This process is called completing the square. So, like it says, sometimes we need to add a term to an expression to make it a perfect square trinomial by a process called completing the square. So, here's our core concept, completing the square. To complete the square for the expression x squared plus bx, we want to add half of b squared. So our b value comes from this x squared plus bx. Whatever number that is, we take half of it, b divided by 2, and then square it. And that'll help us get a perfect square trinomial that we can factor, and it'll give me two factors that are the same. Okay? Anytime I complete the square by adding b over 2 squared, it'll give me a perfect square trinomial. Okay? And this is just kind of a visual of what's going on, but I feel like this confuses y'all more than anything, so we're going to breeze over those squares at the bottom. If you want to go look at it, you can go look at it in your textbook or on the notes later on. So, x squared plus bx, if we add half of b squared to it, it would turn into x plus b over 2 times x plus b over 2, which equals x plus b over 2 squared, perfect square trinomial. Okay? So find the value of c that makes x squared plus 14x plus c a perfect square trinomial. Then write the expression as the square of a binomial. Remember, that's x squared plus bx. X squared plus 14x, right? So do you guys remember what we have to add to complete the square? Based on this slide right here. What do we have to add to complete the square? Half of b squared. So I find my b value, take half of it, and then I square it. So in this case, what is my b value? 14. So I'm doing 14 over 2 squared. It's 14 divided by 2? 7. What's 7 squared? 49. Everyone okay with that? So if I add 49 to x squared plus 14x, it should become a perfect square trinomial. So let's go ahead and factor it and see if it did become a perfect square trinomial. Got our x and our x. That's not equals 49, that's a plus 49, my bad. This plus sign in front of my c value tells me what? That my signs are going to be the same. If they're the same, this tells me what they're going to be. What are they both going to be? Addition. Okay, now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 49. And add to give me 14. What are some numbers that multiply to give me 49?
7 and 7.
7 and 7. What's 7 plus 7?
Your answer.
Is that what I'm wanting?
Yep.
Yes, it is. So how can I write x plus 7 times x plus 7?
7 squared.
Not 7 squared.
7.
What did I just write?
7 squared.
There we go. X plus 7 squared. Does everyone see that? If I have x squared plus bx, anytime I take half of b and square it, and I add that to my binomial, it then becomes a perfect square trinomial. So I can factor it, and it becomes some binomial squared. Does everyone see that? We okay with that? So the method of completing the square can be used to solve any quadratic equation. When you complete the square as part of solving an equation, so imagine that we have an equation now. If I do something to one side of the equation, what do I have to do to the other? Got to do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm completing the square, I've got to add the same number to both sides of the equation. Just like normal. Everyone okay with that concept? To keep my equation equivalent, whatever I do to one side, I've got to do it to the other to keep it balanced. Right? Okay with that concept? So over here, if this was an equation, I added 49 to my left-hand side. What would I have to do to my right-hand side?
The same thing.
Add 49. Whatever I do to one side, I got to do to both sides. So let's see that in practice with an example.
I thought that was an example.
Solve x squared minus 10x plus 7 equals 0 by completing the square.
Where's the square at?
Well, let's look at the polynomial that's on the left-hand side. X squared minus 10x plus 7. Can you think of any numbers that would multiply to give me 7 and add to give me negative 10?
4 and
4 and 3.
4 and 3. 4 times 3 is 12.
What, I have to give you 10 or multiply?
It's got to multiply to give me 7 and add to give me negative 10. No, there's not two numbers that multiply to give me 7, add to give me negative 10, are there? 5 times 2 is 10.
That's opposite.
It's got to multiply to give me 7, add to give me a negative 10. Right? Because it's got to multiply to give me my C value, add to give me my B value for us to be able to factor it. There's nothing there that can do that, is there? So this might be a pretty good problem to complete the square on. Is my left-hand side in the form x squared plus bx?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Guess not.
What would I have to get rid of for it to be x squared plus bx?
Just subtraction.
The 7, right? So how can I get rid of that 7?
Minus 7. on both
Subtract
sides.
7 from both sides. And I'm going to leave a little bit of room because we know what we're going to be doing, right? We're going to be completing the square. Everyone okay with what I've done so far? Okay. Now is it x squared plus bx? On the left-hand side. Yeah, it is. So if I wanted to, I could write that as x squared plus negative 10x. Minus sign just makes it 10 negative. Okay? So, how do I complete the square?
Half make it half.
Make half of what? 10, why 10?
Because it's your B
Because
value.
that's my b value, right? It's my b value. So I'm taking half of 10. After I take half of 10, what do I do with it?
Square it.
Square it. What's half of 10? 5.
Wait, we don't do half of negative 10?
Well, it would turn out to be the same thing. What's half of negative 10?
Yeah, you're right.
It doesn't matter. We can do negative 10 if you want.
No.
Half of negative 10 is negative 5. What's negative 5 squared? 25. So what do I have to add to complete the square? 25. I added it to my left-hand side, so what do I have to do?
Add to the other side.
Add it to my right-hand side as well. Questions with that? Whatever I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. And now I've kept both sides equivalent, have I not?
Yeah.
I've kept both sides equivalent, have I not?
Yeah.
Yes, I have. So now let's go ahead and factor my left-hand side. What's negative 7 plus 25? 18. What are my two signs going to be?
Oh, shoot.
Negative.
They're both going to be subtraction. The plus sign in front of my C value tells me they're going to be the same. The minus sign in front of my B value tells me they're both going to be minus. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 25. Add to give me negative 10. What are they?
Negative 5, negative 5.
Negative 5, negative 5. Am I moving too fast for anybody? I can slow down if I need to. What's another way to write x minus 5 times x minus 5?
X minus 5 squared.
X minus 5 squared equals 18. And I'm solving this equation, right? Trying to get x by itself. So,
Square root it.
I got to take the square root of both sides. Because there's nothing else I can do to that left-hand side, is there? The x minus 5 is protected by that squared. So I got to get rid of the squared by square rooting both sides. Is everyone okay with that concept?
Yeah.
So I get x minus 5 equals, I have the square root of 18. Let's go ahead and simplify that as we write it down. Square root of 18. Is 18 a perfect square? No, it is not. I cannot take the square root of it and get a nice whole number. What's the biggest perfect square that goes into 18?
2.
9. 9 times what would give me 18?
2.
2. Everyone okay with that? We okay simplifying square roots? Okay, what's the square root of 9? Can I take the square root of 2? No, so it stays under the radical. So what do I get on the right side of my equal sign?
3 square root of 2.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Plus minus.
Plus or minus
Are you sure?
3 square root of 2. We okay? Is x by itself yet?
No.
No, it is not. How do I get x by itself here?
Plus
Minus.
5.
Add 5 to both sides. So I would get x equals 5 plus or minus 3 square root of 2. So that would turn into x equals 5 plus 3 square root of 2. X equals 5 minus 3 square root of 2, correct? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm okay leaving it like this unless it asks you to do otherwise. Or if you have multiple choice and all your answers are decimals, then you need to type this in your calculator. But I would just type it in my calculator just like it says. 5 plus 3 square root of 2. Everyone knows how to get a square root in the calculator.
For real.
So if all your answers are decimals, you need to type these in to see what you would get. Does that make sense? We okay? Can I move on?
No shot, dude.
Last example for today. So let's say that this previous example, my a value was 1, correct? The number in front of x squared was 1. Let's look at it when a does not equal 1. Here's my a value 1. Is my a value 1?
No.
No. I do want my a value to be 1 so I can complete the square.
So wouldn't you divide by 3?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to divide my whole equation by 3.
Even the 0?
Yep, because whatever I do to one side, I've got to do to the other, right?
You're not dividing.
So if I'm dividing my left-hand side by 3, I've got to divide each term.
Why don't you find the divide?
Say what?
Why don't you just find the divide?
That's another way of factoring. So you could do that if you wanted to.
Isn't this way easy?
But here we're going to talk about completing the square.
Oh.
Okay? So I divided my left-hand side by 3. Whatever I do to one side, got to do to the other. So I'm just dividing every single thing by 3. 3x squared divided by 3.
X squared.
X squared. 12x divided by 3. 4x. 15 divided by 3. 5. 0 divided by 3.
Black hole.
0. Everyone okay with what I've done? I just divided by my leading coefficient, so now I have 1 in front of x squared. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, are there two numbers that multiply to give me 5 and add to give me 4?
No.
No.
They're not, are there? So this is probably a pretty good method to use completing the square on. Is my left-hand side x squared plus bx?
No.
No, so what do I need to do?
Subtract by 5.
Subtract 5 on both sides. X squared plus 4x equals negative 5. Now, my left-hand side is x squared plus bx. Now I can complete the square on the left-hand side, correct?
Yeah.
So how do we complete the square again?
Do like the 4 divided by 2 squared.
Very good. 4 is my what value?
B.
B value. So I'm taking my B value, dividing it by 2, and then squaring it. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah. Wouldn't it still equal 4?
What's 4 divided by 2?
2.
2. And what's 2 squared?
4.
4. So I'm adding 4 to my left-hand side to complete the square. Whatever I do to one side,
Must.
got to do to the other. You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's factor. Create my 2 parentheses. What variable we're dealing with? X and X. Plus sign in front of my C value tells me what?
Same.
They're going to be the same. If they're the same, this sign in front of my B value tells me what they're both going to be. What are they both going to be? Positive. They're always going to be the same whenever we're dealing with completing the square. They're either both going to be plus or they're both going to be minus. Because remember, my factors have to be the same. Right? So that way we can write it as x plus something squared or x minus something squared. What's negative 5 plus 4?
Negative. Well, 1. Negative 1.
Negative 1. Now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 4.
2.
Add to give me 4. What are they?
2.
2 and 2. What's 2 plus 2?
4.
4.
Wait, what about plus or minus?
Say what?
Plus or minus thing?
They're both plus.
Oh, so we don't have to do a plus or minus.
We haven't taken the square root of anything yet, have we?
You haven't did that
Huh?
You moving too fast.
Okay, I'm slowing down.
No,
No,
he
I
is
am.
moving too
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're jumping ahead. But you are correct. Questions on what I've done so far?
Maybe.
Can I erase my top half?
Yeah. Maybe.
What's another way to write x plus 2 times x plus 2?
X plus 2 squared.
X plus 2 squared equals negative 1. Trying to get x by itself. What do I need to do here? Square root of both sides.
There we go.
So I get x plus 2 on the left-hand side. What do we need?
So it's square root of -1.
No. What were you saying earlier that you were jumping ahead on?
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus, because I'm taking the square root. What's the square root of negative 1?
I.
I. Right?
Isn't it I squared?
Nope. I squared would just give me negative 1. But the square root of negative 1 is just I. Okay? Is x by itself yet?
No.
How do I get x by itself here?
Minus.
Subtract 2 from both sides. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus I. Or you could write it as x equals negative 2 plus I, negative 2 minus I. There's a couple ways to write it. Are those in standard form? Yes. If we have a complex number, we want to go ahead and write it in standard form when we write it as our answer. Okay? Questions on example 4? Not too bad? Good stuff. We go with completing the square? All right, here we go.
No.
Page 140.
Oh wait, never mind. Take you.
2 through 20 evens. 26 through 36 evens. This we do Wednesday, the 17th,
What other?
on Canvas.
I can't
Are there any questions about my notes before I end the recording?